Hi, my name is Ray Johnson, and I am a former criminal investigator in DuPage County. And once I left police work is when I really became interested in the 1956 unsolved murders of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. Barbara was 15, Patricia was 13, and they lived on 3634 South Damen in the McKinley Park neighborhood. So it all started on December 28th, 1956. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were eating dinner, and they left around 7:30 to go see the Elvis Presley movie Love Me Tender at the Brighton Theater. The plan was they were going to take the bus there and back. They left home and didn't come back. And so their mother, Loretta, did go to the police to actually make an official report. And for about a week, the police really didn't take it very seriously, and they thought maybe they were runaways. Loretta never believed that for a minute. In fact, they had just celebrated Christmas and they left all of their Christmas presents at home. They didn't take a change of clothes. They weren't having problems at home. So there is really no reason for them to run away. After about a week had gone by, then the police started to take it a little bit more seriously. Once it made the newspapers, the difficult thing is that it wasn't as though there were no leads in the case. It was that there were too many. And everyone seemed to have seen the Grimes sisters at one point in time. And there was stuff coming in all the way from Tennessee saying that, the girls went to see their idol, Elvis Presley. And then eventually people who knew the sisters came forward and said that they did see the sisters at the theater. The key was nobody knows what happened to them afterwards. So basically it became a huge missing persons case. Elvis Presley himself actually got on the radio at one point once he heard about the case and said, if you're good Elvis Presley fans, you'll go home to your mom as soon as you can. Of course, once Elvis got involved, then it was everywhere. And still to this day, it's the most number of man hours ever spent on a Chicago case. And it became actually a murder case on January 22nd, 1957, when a gentleman named Leonard Prescott was driving eastbound on German Church Road and saw what he believed to be two mannequins on the north side of the road. The Willow Springs police showed up, verified that they were two unclothed young females. At that point, the girls were taken to the morgue. The only person ever arrested as a suspect in the case was an individual by the name of Bennie Bedwell. And the people that turned him in were his employers. He was a dishwasher, and the employers remember him being with two girls that kind of reminded them of the Grimes sisters. The sheriff's department had picked up Bennie, and it would have never flown today, but they had actually interrogated him in a motel room for 3 days, which was owned by a Cook County Sheriff's deputy. And lo and behold, after 3 days of interrogation, Bennie had a written statement confessing to the murder of the Grimes sisters. But one of the big problems was the fact that Bennie couldn't read or write, and he had some mental challenges and disabilities. And so what he was signing, there was no way he would be able to read anyway. There were a lot of very high-profile crimes against the kids that happened around the same time. So the sheriff's department was obviously under pressure to try to solve the case. What actually saved Bennie was the autopsies, because Bennie's story basically said that he had been out with the girls for a month with another individual, and they were wining and dining them and taking them to movies and going out and having drinks and having consensual sex. But once the autopsy was completed, they determined that the girls died within 4 hours of them actually leaving home, which totally threw out Bennie's whole confession. And then after that, there were a number of suspects that came up, but nobody was actually arrested. Went cold pretty quickly. So when I got interested in it, I actually started doing research for a book. And I came across an individual who, a year after the Grimes case, had actually murdered a girl in a similar fashion. And his name was Charles Leroy Melquist. And the girl that he murdered was a girl by the name of Bonnie Lee Scott. And Bonnie Lee Scott was a 15-year-old sophomore from York High School. She was found on November 15th, 1958, in the wooded area just on the southwest corner of 95th and LaGrange Road, which was only about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile away from where the Grimes sisters were found. She was unclothed the same way, just left at the side of the road. Loretta Grimes, when her girls were missing, and even after they were found murdered, received a lot of phone calls and really nasty letters from people. But she did remember one phone call. She said she would never forget his voice because he mentioned something in the phone call that nobody else knew. And it wasn't in the newspapers. It wasn't publicized in any way. And the guy says, "I'm the one that undressed your girls. And I know something that nobody else knows. And that's the fact that the little one has crossed toes." And by little one, he was referring to Barbara, because Barbara was actually the smaller of the two girls, even though she was the older one. And she did, in fact, have semi-crossed toes, which when she was nervous, it actually got worse. And as soon as he said that, he laughed, and then he hung up the phone. Well, when Bonnie Lee Scott's body was found in November of 1958, they didn't really even know who she was. There was a little blurb in one of the DuPage papers the day that the article came out. Loretta received another phone call, and she said she's absolutely positive that the person who called her was the same individual who had called her about her girls. And he said, "I got away with another one. They're not going to be able to pin this on Bennie Bedwell or Barry Cook." And then he laughed the same way he did a year earlier and hung up the phone. Really, the only person that would be watching the papers that closely for this particular thing would be the killer of Bonnie Lee Scott. That was, for me, the most damning piece of evidence. Unfortunately, Charles Melquist, the killer of Bonnie Lee Scott, passed away, but we don't believe he acted alone. We believe that there's a good possibility that there's at least 2 or 3 individuals who are still alive today that are aware of what happened. Melquist may have had some unwitting accomplices in order to put him in touch with some young girls from the neighborhood. We're just hoping that people come forward who maybe haven't in the past, that maybe we sparked their memory. If anyone out there has any information on the case, no matter how small they may think it is, make sure to call the Cook County Sheriff's Department Cold Case Unit tip line, which is 708-865-4549, 708-865-4549. So you can also go to our Facebook group that we started so that people could share information regarding the case in an open forum and request to be added to the group. Barbara and Patricia, they still have a brother and a sister who are desperately looking for closure. There's not a day that goes by that they don't think of Barbara and Patricia and what may have happened to them. Their mother's letter is actually on the wall of the investigations unit, asking the police to please never give up looking for her girls. They just need the closure.